During the mid-1980s, as British Leyland was prepared for privatisation and its new flagship executive car, the Rover 800, was nearing completion, an incredibly stylistic concept for a coupe version of this machine would come to pass as the Rover CCV, or Coupe Concept Vehicle, essentially just a styling exercise to test the waters with regard to the upcoming 800. However, the CCV's phenomenal reception at the 1986 Turin Motor Show would form the start of a protracted and difficult development stage for what should otherwise have been a simple conversion of the Rover 800 saloon into a two-door coupe, the final product ultimately coming too late to reverse the fortunes of the wider company going into the 1990s. The origins of the Rover CCV begin with Project XX, the original code name for the Rover 800, which was intended to replace the Rover SD1 executive saloon of 1977, the 800 owing a large number of its underpinnings to the Honda legend thanks to the signing of a technology sharing agreement between British Leyland and Honda during 1979. Come the middle of the 1980s, the policies of the then Thatcher government dictated the gradual privatisation of British Leyland, with the general direction heading towards a potential purchase by British Aerospace, thus creating the Rover Group as an official successor to the British Leyland firm during 1986. As such, enthusiasm was high within the ranks of the company during the mid-1980s for a possible resurgence onto the global market once the partially nationalised car builder had been unshackled from state control, this being reflected in a slew of upcoming models, as well as various concept cars that truly showed the design prowess and aspirations of the company's engineering division. In 1985, the MG EXE, a proposed 186-mile-an-hour supercar, was unveiled at the Turin Motor Show, and while the resultant concept was simply an engineless shell, there were many qualities to the EXE that could have made it ideal for production. Its incredible style, combined with the outstanding power unit of the MG Metro 6R4 rally car, potentially creating a machine that could have challenged the Porsche 959. However, while the MG EXE never made it to mass assembly, Roy Axe, director of design, felt it was vital that these concept cars be produced prior to the launch of the Rover 800 as a means of re-establishing the credibility of the firm on the world stage after over a decade of stagnation and neglect. Therefore, to support the upcoming 800, Axe proposed the development of a coupe model that was loosely based around the underpinnings of the executive saloon, and would be the ideal showcase for the company's talents, while at the same time illustrating to the management how appealing an 800-based two-door coupe could be in the marketplace. Planning for the coupe was led by Axe himself, with Gordon Sked and Richard Hamblin in support, Axe being doubtful that the management would support the idea of a coupe based on the 800, considering that they would perceive it as an unnecessary extravagance at a time when the company was facing severe financial turmoil prior to its privatisation. However, the overarching goal regardless was to drum up enthusiasm for the later 800, presenting what was essentially a teaser for the new machine prior to its launch later in 1986, the same design team that produced the EXE being employed in developing what was dubbed the Rover CCV, or Coupe Concept Vehicle. Under Axe's direction, the CCV, which was expected to appear at the Turin Motor Show of April 1986, only 3 months before the launch of the Rover 800, would bear a general resemblance to the production saloon, sharing the same basic form and character lines, but with a more striking front and rear that greatly enhanced the 800-based profile. Developed over the course of 6 months, the CCV was an extremely handsome car for the period, adopting slim headlights that bracketed a slit-like grille, while a mock-up interior was also provided that boasted solid-state instrumentation and a dashboard-mounted CD player, the resultant car being considered very pleasing by Axe, though he was still skeptical about its potential future. Making its scheduled appearance at the 1986 Turin Motor Show, the CCV received an overwhelmingly positive response from visitors and motoring critics, who considered it an exceptional preview of what the Rover 800 styling might entail prior to its official launch in August of the same year. Such was the enthusiasm of those viewing the Rover CCV that many dealers in the United States signed on to the Sterling project, as Rover's attempted re-entry onto the American market based solely on the strength of the concept car. This attitude was reflected by Axe and the design and marketing departments, who believed that for the Sterling project, which considered the sale of the Rover 800 four-door executive saloon in the United States, it would be essential to sell a two-door coupe alongside it so as to appeal to more affluent customers in California and the Northeast Seaboard. However, though the car appeared ostensibly to be a machine almost ready to enter production, Axe was quick to note that there was still a considerable amount of work necessary in order to create a functioning machine that met the latest safety and emissions legislation, especially for the much-desired American market. Furthermore, the management, based on the limited funds of the newly established Rover Group, could not invest in the production of an 800-based coupe at this point, instead focusing on a Metro replacement, a facelifted Rover 200, and a new mid-range SUV for Land Rover that would eventually come to pass as the Discovery of 1989. Unfortunately, despite Axe considering that the CCV would be the linchpin of success for the Sterling scheme, and was investigated seriously by the company, the executive staff gave it no commitment, much to the chagrin of the highly optimistic American dealers who had hoped to procure an 800-based coupe alongside the regular four-door saloon when Sterling commenced from 1987. However, despite the CCV remaining an engineless concept car, Axe continued to push for a Rover 800-based coupe, and the management opposition to the project began to soften, especially following the release of the Sterling, during which the car demonstrated a complete inability to sell, fueled largely by reliability concerns and the American market already being saturated by four-door executive models. Thus, with Axe having been proven right with regard to the need for providing a two-door coupe in America, he was granted limited autonomy on an extremely small budget to begin work on a dedicated production version of the car, outsourcing much of the early concept work to International Automotive Design or IAD. Under the code name Project Anna, a hardtop and drop-top variant of the machine was conceived that would be aimed squarely at the American market, as demonstrated by its US regulation side running lights, the resultant clay models bearing a close resemblance to the CCV, except for the more feasible headlights, which comprise semi-covered units with lift-up flaps and a glasshouse construction. However, Axe was displeased with IAD's products, deeming the two clay models presented in 1987 as not different enough from the previous CCV to justify the time taken to build them, and more importantly the significant expense of their work, which outstripped the limited budget allocated by the Rover Group management. IAD's reasoning as to the disappointing delivery of the Rover 800 coupe and convertible concepts was simply down to the unique nature of the coupe body shell, which required a bespoke structure that led to high levels of investment in order to get into production, with the resultant car, that bore many visual similarities to the Cadillac Alante, diverging too far from the Rover 800 to be a simple conversion. The matter of funding and justification was further hampered by the continuing failure of Sterling in America, with Arcona, or Austin Rover Cars of North America, facing a precipitous fall in sales of the Sterling 825 and 827, with output dropping from 14,171 units during the launch year of 1987 to 8,901 units for 1988 and 5,907 for 1989. Regardless, while the matter of providing a dedicated Sterling coupe for the United States was but a minor concern when compared to the reliability problems plaguing the mainstream four-door saloons, Axe maintained his lobbying for the 800-based coupe, considering that a low-cost variant of the model could still be delivered by carrying over much more from the saloon than had previously been proposed. Essentially, the direction of the project would now be to share as many of the 800's underpinnings and external panels as possible, while only a small number of stylistic changes would be needed to create an appealing two-door variant of the executive saloon, though again, a demoralized management, in the face of Sterling's failure, gave little support to the design team. Despite the poor experience with IAD, Axe and designer Adrian Griffiths were once again forced to seek the assistance of external contractors to help deliver an 800 coupe on as small a budget as possible, turning to the American Sunroof Company of Warren, Michigan, who had an excellent record in providing convertible versions of regular production cars for the Detroit Big Three. While Griffiths was able to meet with ASC in the United States to discuss the possibility of a saloon-to-coupe transition, the management was again unwilling to commit their full resources to the project, and progress slowed to a crawl, with the expectation being that this car would once again never make it beyond the mock-up stage. In the end, ASC, who had been provided a Sterling 800 for the purposes of their concept testing, were able to create an extremely attractive hardtop coupe that provided a tidy mixture between the standard 800 and the CCV, sharing a large number of regular panels, but being different enough to not be considered merely a quick and easy conversion. Sadly, due to the need to modify the understructure of the Rover 800 platform, too many compromises had to be made that overlooked the limited resources and funding of the engineering teams at the Rover Group, who were more focused on the likes of the Rover 200 facelift than the Land Rover Discovery. Furthermore, while the coupe and later convertible were arguably very pretty machines, a brief period of circulation around customer clinics in the United States illustrated a very poor response from potential buyers. Despite this, the management were more determined than ever to get a coupe version of the 800 on sale in America at the first possible opportunity, convinced that, as the Sterling's output continued to plummet, the delivery of the much sought-after coupe would help rescue the brand before its inevitable collapse. Therefore, in 1988, the Rover Group management chose to completely reface their models with a proposed brand update of the R17 project, an in-house styling refurbishment that would not only improve the aesthetics of the regular four-door saloon, but also see the delivery of a dedicated coupe model that would be developed at the Cowley plant near Oxford. The general underpinnings of the R17 scheme would be to replace the straight lines and hard angles of the original Rover 800 with curves and rounded corners, creating a more aerodynamic and sweeping profile that would, from its conception, incorporate the potential conversion of the saloon into a low-slung coupe, thoroughly distancing itself from the CCV 4 years after its debut. The mantra of the project would be that as much of the engineering and mechanics of the coupe would be shared with the saloon, and the only differences between the two would be completely cosmetic, the car gaining a simpler body section and a stronger D-pillar, while a grille, reminiscent of the classic Rover P5 of the 1950s and 60s, would be applied to all models so as to add an air of class and distinction. With Richard Woolley and David Saddington charged with the styling, the R17 Rover 800 Coupe would again be aimed squarely at the American market, who now desired a more conservative-looking machine as opposed to the bombastic coupes and convertibles of the mid-1980s, as per the CCV, which, even after only 4 years, looks severely dated by the standards of 1990. With Sterling now in its death throes in the United States, the Rover Group press office released concept sketches of the coupe during early 1990 to try and reignite some spark of enthusiasm for the brand. The coupe concepts, much like the CCV from 1986, again striking a chord with American dealers, many of whom were willing to take a chance on the upcoming two-door model. Unfortunately, the Americans would be disappointed again, as amidst falling sales and an irreversibly bad name with customers and the press, the Rover Group opted to abandon Sterling in the American market during 1991, thus robbing the Rover 800 Coupe of the customer base it had been squarely designed to appeal to. The dilemma faced by the Rover 800 Coupe was the fact that, in Europe, big coupes, with the exception of the established luxury marks like Jaguar and Mercedes-Benz, found little traction in terms of sales, and now it appeared that this model was being developed for potential buyers that didn't exist in quantities to justify its production. Thankfully, in spite of calls by Rover's accountants to have the project axed, the upper management pushed through with the scheme to completion, and in 1992, the Rover 800 Coupe was launched as the company flagship, being introduced with every conceivable option as standard, and a range-topping price befitting its status within the range. However, the pricing of the Rover 800 Coupe would be perhaps its biggest bone of contention, as the Rover brand, by this point, had settled into a reputation of affordable executive luxury that sat beneath the big players of Germany, the £30,770 retail price of the coupe, placing it in the company of the Mercedes-Benz 300 CE and the Jaguar XJS, cars with brand recognition to support such an expense. Thus, following a scathing review by several car magazines, whose criticism centered solely around the price tag, combined with a general hesitancy towards big coupes outside the United States, the Rover 800 Coupe proved yet again to be a sales disappointment for the Rover Group, and whatever forecasts were hoped for by the machine despite the loss of its primary market were never met. Nevertheless, aside from the harsh reviews of the price, the interior styling of Wynne Thomas and the Rover design team received heartfelt acclaim, and the Rover 800 Coupe was considered a triumph of luxuriously fine leather and wood blend that created a perfect ambience, even rivaling the likes of Mercedes-Benz and Jaguar in practical terms for the delivery of pure class. Furthermore, the Honda-sourced V6 also received positive feedback from customers and road testers, being a smooth and sophisticated power unit that again rivaled the qualities of Mercedes-Benz, even putting the Honda legend off which it was based to shame. Therefore, despite the car not meeting its sales forecast, Rover continued a limited development program on the coupe, starting with a more realistic pricing strategy, followed by a product maximization initiative, with a 2-litre turbo engine being added to the range to create the Vitesse Sport, a revival of the classic moniker of SD1 heritage, and able to deliver 197 horsepower. In Vitesse Sport form, the Rover 800 Coupe was a sublime mixture of style and substance, giving the car the performance necessary to match the established crop of Jaguar and Mercedes-Benz, but also new rivals in the form of BMW. Unfortunately, the provision of the Vitesse Sport came too late to reverse the overall fortunes of the Rover 800 range, as German opposition in the form of BMW's 5 Series had easily saturated the market, and there was little opportunity to break the stranglehold of the Teutonic giants, while Rover's marketing team were at this point busy endearing the new Rover 600 to the junior executive demographic. In the end, the failure of the Rover 800 Coupe to meet its forecasts was not through lack of quality or finish, but was simply a matter of encouraging buyers to want to actually come and take a look for themselves at showrooms across Britain and Europe, feedback from those who did undertake driver experience days being overwhelmingly positive, but not enough to justify the price. Ultimately, the Rover 800 Coupe did sell, with the 2-litre turbo being a popular machine in Italy, where it accounted for 70% of all coupe sales for the 1993 fiscal year, though without the original American market it had been tailored to serve, the car was very much an exercise in missed opportunities and wasted potential. Had the car been sold on the American market under the Sterling brand, there was no doubt by industry observers that it had all the momentum to be a commercial success, much like the Sterling 825 and 827 saloons when they appeared during 1987, the Achilles heel of the entire project being the sheer lack of quality build that sullied the reputation of the brand within its opening year. Sadly, the loss of Sterling in the American market very much robbed the 800 Coupe of its justification, with even its progenitor, Roy Axe, considering that once Sterling had been wrapped up in 1991, the Rover 800 Coupe should have been scrapped, the 800 range itself having been designed for a 6-year life cycle, but by the time of the Coupe's launch was destined for a minimum of 10 years in circulation. This meant that the Rover 800 Coupe was essentially an old car when delivered new in 1992, with too many elements of mid-1980s thinking ingrained within its fundamental design to make it a viable alternative to brand-new Jaguar and Mercedes equivalents, while even the Honda legend had been able to receive a second-generation facelift and was preparing for a third-generation model by the time of the launch. In the end, the Rover 800 Coupe and the CCV that preceded it were simply the victims of Rover's inability to provide quality items on the United States under the Sterling mark. As if the reliability of these early cars had met the expectations of a demanding customer base, these models could have easily met their forecast sales potential, as reflected in the less refined but mechanically identical legend. As is, Sterling's failure can be attributed not just to the poor reliability, but also the fact that a dedicated coupe did not join the project either at launch or soon afterwards, the management instead getting cold feet over the whole scheme, and thus delaying the coupe to the point that it lost all relevance, thereby wasting what truly could have been a valiant rival to the likes of Mercedes and BMW.